2,000 years ago, Rome faced an empire too vast to control. Messages, armies, and trade could not move fast enough. The solution? A road that would defy time itself. Soldiers, slaves, and engineers carved through mountains, drained swamps, and leveled forests. Every stone laid was a battle against nature and a triumph of human ambition. By the sweat of countless hands, Rome built more than a road. They built a legacy, a path that still stands today, stretching straight through history. Imagine standing in the heart of Rome 2,000 years ago. The city is alive with the sound of merchants shouting prices, soldiers sharpening swords, and senators debating in marble halls. Rome was more than a city. It was the center of an empire stretching across continents. But here was the problem. How do you control land so vast from Britain to Egypt, from Spain to Mesopotamia, without modern technology? The answer was simple yet revolutionary: roads. The Romans knew that an empire could not survive without movement. Messages had to reach generals at the frontier. Soldiers needed to march quickly to crush rebellions. Traders had to move goods, grain, wine, olive oil, silk, faster than ever before. Roads were not just stone paths. They were the veins and arteries of Rome, pumping life into its farthest corners. When an emperor gave the order to build a new road, it was more than construction. It was a statement of power. The legions would carve their presence into the land, leaving behind a symbol that whispered to conquered peoples: Rome is here, and Rome will stay. But before the first stone was laid, the process began with the surveyors, the agrimensores. Armed with tools like the groma, a strange cross-shaped instrument, they stepped into the wilderness. Their mission: find the straightest, most efficient path. They cared little for hills, rivers, or forests. If mountains stood in the way, they cut through them. If swamps blocked the path, they drained them. Their guiding principle was clear: roads must be straight, strong, and everlasting. Picture a group of soldiers watching these surveyors at work. One might joke, why not go around the hill? It's easier. But the surveyor with a firm gaze would answer, Rome does not go around obstacles. Rome conquers them. That mindset was the secret to their success. The people who lived along these new routes often watched in awe and fear. They knew that once the stakes were planted and chalk lines drawn, their world was about to change forever. Rome was about to stitch the land together, one stone at a time. The decision to build a Roman road was not taken lightly. Once the emperor or senate approved it, the chosen route became a matter of destiny, not debate. Soldiers, engineers, and laborers gathered at the starting point, waiting for the surveyors to strike their first marks into the land. The agrimensores walked with confidence, carrying their groma, a wooden cross mounted on a stand with hanging plumb lines. This simple-looking tool could draw perfect right angles, ensuring roads ran in straight, unwavering lines. To the untrained eye, it looked like superstition, but to the Romans, it was the key to empire. Imagine a clearing at the edge of a forest. The surveyor plants his groma firmly in the ground, squints against the sun, and signals to his assistant holding a long pole in the distance. Slowly, step by step, they align until the road's first line is born. Behind them, soldiers hammer stakes into the earth, marking the sacred path. From that moment, the line was law. No farmer's protest, no village boundary, and no natural obstacle would bend it. But not everyone welcomed this new destiny. Villagers often gathered, uneasy and suspicious. "Why must your road cut through my field?" a farmer might cry, pointing angrily at the stakes. The Roman officer, calm yet firm, would reply, "This is not just a road. This is Rome, and Rome benefits all." The promise of faster trade, safer travel, and imperial protection often followed, though for many locals it felt more like invasion than progress. The path was not just drawn, it was blessed. Roman priests sometimes performed small rituals, sprinkling wine on the ground, asking the gods for safe passage and endurance. The road, after all, was not only for soldiers and merchants, It was also a symbol of divine order spreading across chaos. Then came the clearing. Teams of workers cut down trees, uprooted stumps, and leveled the earth. Sweat dripped down their backs as axes rang through the forest air. Dust clouds rose when rocks were broken apart. Every step was labor, but every strike of the tool carried pride. For they knew they were not just building for today. They were carving eternity. By the end of this stage, the wilderness no longer belonged to itself. A straight, commanding scar ran across the land, marked with stakes, blessed with ritual, and guarded by legionaries. It was the skeleton of the future road, a promise that Rome's order had arrived. The stakes had been planted, the path was chosen, and now the real work began. The road needed bones, a foundation strong enough to survive centuries. To build it, Roman soldiers and local laborers turned into human machines, digging, hauling, and shaping the earth with unshakable discipline. First came the trench. Imagine lines of men with picks and shovels, their faces streaked with sweat and dust as they carved a deep channel into the earth. The sound of iron striking soil and stone filled the air like a drumbeat of empire. For hours, then days, then weeks, they dug, sometimes sinking several feet down depending on the terrain. Every scoop of earth carried a vision. This was no ordinary road, it was a lifeline of Rome. The bottom of the trench became the stage for the statumen, the first layer of the road. Large, heavy stones, sometimes as big as a man's torso, were dragged into place. They were not laid carelessly. Each stone was positioned with precision, fitted like the bones of a giant creature. This was the skeleton that would bear them. Weight of armies, traders, and carriages for generations. Soldiers used wooden mallets to hammer the stones flat, their chants keeping rhythm. One strike, one stone, one empire. The terrain often fought back. In marshlands, the ground swallowed stones like quicksand. To solve this, engineers ordered wooden piles to be driven into the mud, creating a stable base before laying stone. In rocky hills, men carved steps into the slopes, turning rugged cliffs into roadbeds. And when valleys opened wide before them, bridges of stone arches were raised, their shadows stretching like fingers across the land. These struggles became stories told around campfires. A legionary might laugh and say, "We fought a mountain today. It tried to stand in Rome's way, but we cut its heart open." Another would add, "The swamp tried to drown us, but Rome walked across its back." For them, every obstacle was not a setback, but a conquest. Day after day, the trench widened and deepened, and the foundation stones locked into place. Looking at the work, a centurion might murmur proudly, "Strong bones. This road will outlive us all." And he was right. The bones they buried in the earth were not just stones. They were the promise of a road that would endure longer than their own names, longer even than Rome itself. With the bones of the road buried deep, the Romans turned to the next stage, the muscles and flesh that would give the road its strength. This was the part that transformed raw stone into a highway fit for emperors and legions. It was back-breaking work, but it was also the secret to why Roman roads still exist 2,000 years later. Over the foundation, stones came the rudis, a thick middle layer of smaller stones mixed with lime and gravel. Picture hundreds of men hauling baskets of crushed rock, their shoulders straining, their hands calloused. They poured the mixture into the trench, spreading it evenly like bakers smoothing dough. But this was no gentle act. Soldiers took heavy, rammers, wooden poles with iron bases and pounded the ground until it shook. Thud, thud, thud. The rhythm echoed across the valley, each strike locking the stones tighter, each blow sealing Rome's grip on the land. Above the rudis came the nucleus, a smoother layer of gravel, sand, and sometimes a form of early cement. This was carefully leveled to create a solid base, almost like a canvas waiting for a masterpiece. Engineers walked the line with measuring rods, checking angles, ensuring every inch was perfect. The slightest mistake here could lead to cracks. Years later, and for Rome, cracks were unacceptable. But this stage was not just about strength. It was about precision. Workers argued over details, shouting across the trench. "More gravel here. Flatten that edge." A centurion would step in, his voice sharp. Remember, this is not for you, this is for Rome. Build it as if Caesar himself will march tomorrow. The terrain still tested them. In rain, the lime turned to sticky mud that clung to their sandals. In blazing sun, the gravel burned their hands. Yet no weather halted them. Discipline was Rome's greatest weapon. A soldier once wrote in a letter, "Home. The sun scorches us. The stones cut us. But when I see the road stretch straight to the horizon, I feel I am building forever." By the end of this stage, the trench was no longer just a cut in the earth. It had become a layered fortress of stone and gravel, stronger than any single material alone. Standing at its edge, an engineer might whisper with pride, "Now the road has strength. Soon, it will have a crown." After weeks of digging, layering, and pounding, the road finally reached its crowning stage, the summum dorsum, the top surface. This was what travelers would see and touch, the polished crown of Roman engineering. For the builders, it was a moment of pride. For the empire, it was the mark of civilization itself. The workers brought in massive paving stones, some weighing hundreds of pounds. These were not rough boulders, but carefully shaped slabs, cut in quarries miles away and dragged by oxen, carts, and sheer manpower. Imagine the scene. Dozens of men straining against ropes, sweat dripping down their backs, as a single slab slid into place like a puzzle piece. Every stone mattered. Every joint had to fit seamlessly, so carts and chariots could roll smoothly for centuries. The surface was not flat like modern roads. Roman engineers gave it a gentle arch, a camber rising in the middle and sloping down to the sides. This allowed rain to run off quickly, preventing the deadly enemy of roads, water damage. Along the edges, drainage ditches or stone curbs carried away the flow, leaving the road dry and strong. Even in storms, the Roman road endured. Soldiers and engineers worked side by side, kneeling over the slabs, tapping them with iron tools, adjusting until each one locked into its neighbor. The sound of chisels striking stone filled the air like music of industry. One soldier might grin at another and say, "When our children walk here, they'll think the earth itself grew these stones." But it wasn't just functionality. The surface had a beauty to it. In the sunlight, the tightly packed slabs glimmered faintly, giving the impression of a grand mosaic stretching to the horizon. Travelers arriving on a finished Roman road often stopped in awe. To them, it was like stepping into a world crafted by gods, not men. When the final stone was set, the centurion walked the length of the road, boots echoing against the fresh surface. He ran his hand across the smooth slabs and nodded with approval. "Strong enough for Caesar, straight enough for Mars," he declared. The men cheered, their fatigue momentarily forgotten. They had crowned the road with perfection. At last, the path was no longer just a trench filled with stones. It was a living highway, ready for the march of legions, the creak of trade carts, and the footsteps of history. The crown was in place, and Rome's promise of eternity shone with every stone. With the crown of stone laid, the road was complete, but its story had only just begun. From Rome to the farthest provinces, this path would carry legions, traders, messengers, and emperors for centuries. It was no longer a project. It was a legacy. Milestones were set along the way, each one marking 1,000 paces, roughly a Roman mile. Names of emperors and builders were carved into the stones declaring, "I built this road, and I built an empire." These markers were both practical and symbolic, reminding travelers of distance and authority. Roads became lifelines of commerce and communication, shortening journeys that once took weeks into days. Letters, military orders, and fresh news could now travel faster than ever before. Soldiers marched along the straight stretches, boots in perfect rhythm, knowing that a well-built road could mean victory in battle. Caravans of merchants followed, carrying goods that fed Rome's appetite for wealth: wine from Gaul, silk from the East, grain from Africa. The roads brought distant worlds together. Villagers who had once opposed the construction began to see the road as a gift. Trade grew in their towns, Travelers brought news and ideas, and local markets flourished. What had seemed an intrusion became a bridge to opportunity. In some villages, the first inns were built along these roads to accommodate weary travelers. Life began to move faster, wider, and more connected than ever. The road also stood as a symbol. Standing on the slabs, a traveler could feel the empire beneath his feet. The straight lines stretching over hills, valleys, and rivers whispered of Roman discipline and ambition. Each stone had been laid by hands that had endured hardship, sweat, and even danger. And yet, centuries later, some of these roads are still visible, their paths still cutting through modern Europe. A centurion once said, watching a new legion march across a freshly paved road, "We do not build for ourselves, we build for Rome, and Rome lasts forever." That was the truth. Roman roads were more than infrastructure. They were monuments, veins of civilization and pathways of eternity. As the sun set, casting long shadows over the slabs, one could almost hear the whispers of history, traders, soldiers, and travelers, moving across the empire carrying stories, commerce, and culture. Rome's vision of unity, power, and endurance had been realized. The road stretched endlessly forward, a perfect symbol of human ambition, skill, and legacy. 2 millennia later, the roads of Rome still cut across continents. They are more than stone. They are monuments to vision, ambition, and human perseverance. Legions marched, merchants traveled, and stories spread along these straight paths. Every step echoed the sweat and skill of those who built them. Rome may have fallen, but its roads endure. Standing on these stones today, you walk through history, on the very paths that shaped an empire.